Hello everybody and welcome to Kaiju Cryptids Nightmare on Monster Island audio commentary, Part 2. And Part 2 starts where Part 1 left off, with the Guardians capturing Gorgie Kruger and taking him away to the underworld. Now that purple void that Gorgie Kruger is kept in, the main reason why it's purple is because, well, purple's my least favourite colour. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is a nice colour, and it does look good on the Safari Limited Hydra, even though I would have preferred it if it was grey or blue, just like the Hydra from Jason and the Argonauts. But I do think that purple is a humiliating colour for a Godzilla. Even though, again, Godzilla 2000's dorsal spines are purple, but I digress. So after hearing the story, the trio realise that the next time one of them falls asleep, they will die. And so they try to stay awake. The title card with the bloodstained emoji, that's actually meant to be a reference to the smiley face urban legend. It's basically about a serial killer who leaves smiley faces on his victims. That grey brick in front of the trio is meant to be a TV, and yes, it's a piece from the Dragon Sphinx that I made many years ago. And they're also watching the Dragon Complex again. But they are, however, getting very tired, as you can tell by the expressions. And as you saw, Vaughn was just about to nod off, but then managed to wake himself up. And it's here that Anguirus decides that he's going to go into the dream world. But this time, instead of running away, he's got to battle Gorgie Kruger. Also, I should say this about Anguirus is that, in the show prior to this one, he always spoke with a Mexican accent because he was calling everybody senor. Well, I did eventually think that Anguirus speaking Mexican was a bad move, and he didn't seem ideal for it. And that's why I decided to change his voice, start from this episode. And so from now on, in future episodes of Kaiju Cryptids, including the upcoming Mission Gorath, Anguirus will have Abe's voice. And to all those who are wondering who Abe is, he's basically a blue alien-looking character, a creature called a Mudokan, who's from the Oddworld series, which is my favourite video game franchise of all time. I used to play Oddworld Abe's Odyssey near religiously as a kid, and I still do now and then to this day. Speaking of which, we actually have an Oddworld reference here, but in Abe's Odyssey, as well as its remake, New and Tasty, when Abe came across some lights, he would chant and words would appear. Well, naturally, I wanted to add them to this episode. Only here, they would guide Anguirus throughout the nightmare. Also in the game, they made little wind-like noises. So if you're wondering what that blowing noise is, well, again, it's a reference to Oddworld. The glow magic words were actually going to be explained in a deleted scene, but the reason why that scene was cut from the episode is because, well, I was crunched for time, and I'd been working on the project for about 8 months. Where previous episodes, as well as other animations, would take only a couple of weeks to make. Where this one took me nearly a year to do, because this episode was made during the pandemic, and my father was actually working from home at the time, so I had to work downstairs in the dining room, hence why some of the videos I made throughout 2020 were echoey, and I was starting to get pretty tired of it, so that's why the scene was dropped. Now for this scene when Gorgie Kruger says, "I am also the devil!" That's actually meant to be a reference to the Angry Video Game Nerd episode, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde Revisited. It's the scene when the nerd, who by this point has become Mr. Hyde, is attacked by the skeleton of Robert Louis Stevenson, the author of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and also Treasure Island apparently. The skeleton flips the bird and then he goes, "I am the devil!" Well, I want to make a little reference to that scene, as I am, after all, an Angry Video Game Nerd fan. I do actually prefer James Rolfe over Doug Walker any day of the week, so therefore that makes me Team Nerd, and not Team Critic. And now I think it's time that I talk about the dungeon scene. In the script, the nightmare was actually meant to take place on a European World War II field, and so there were going to be landmines, grenades, and all sorts of bombs all over the place. And you would hear army tanks and explosions in the background. And how Anguirus was going to trap Gorgie Kruger was that he was going to dig a pit and then place some landmines inside, to which then he would call Gorgie Kruger over and Soko would charge, only to fall into the pit. Well, again, because I don't have Photoshop, it couldn't be done, and I think a dungeon is an ideal location for a nightmare. By the way, the crack that's leaking steam that appears in front of Anguirus, the way it's shaped, that's actually meant to be a reference to the glowing crack in Doctor Who, where basically you look into it and you lose a memory, or you fall into it and your existence is erased. And for the sound effect of the steam that consumes Gorgie Kruger, that comes from LNER A4 Pacific, Union, South Africa. That was from a Steam event that I attended many years ago. So Gorgie Kruger vanishes, and Anguirus is relieved, thinking that he has defeated Soko and believes that the nightmare has ended. But it's not yet over. Originally in the script, the scene was going to change from a World War II setting to a nice Hawaiian beach in the sun. However, the sky would change from blue to grey, the beach would go from paradise to apocalyptic, and the sea would bubble aggressively, and that's when Goji Kruger would rise from the depths, Gnome King style. Again, because I don't have Photoshop, it couldn't be done. So what I decided to do instead was to have some of the pillars and statues explode, and then the ground would begin to crack, just like you see in the Ice Age movies. And how Goji Kruger in his gigantic form would make his appearance would be through an atomic explosion, which is what the sound effect is. Also, when Goji Kruger evolves into his gigantic form, that's pretty much a homage to the NES Godzilla creepypasta Chapter 8 for Battle with Red. When Sack 40 defeated Red, the Red Demon transformed into his gigantic form. And yes, when Anguirus goes, "Oh shit," that's a little reference to Madison Russell's reaction when she found King Ghidorah staring at her in Godzilla King of the Monsters, my personal favourite Monsterverse movie, by the way. So for Goji Kruger's gigantic form, I actually wanted to use the Tamashii Nation's SH Monster Arts figure of the GMK 2001 Godzilla, but unfortunately that model costs an arm and a leg, so I purchased the NECA figure instead. And when I say purchase, I mean I got it for Christmas 2019. And it's a great model, don't get me wrong. It's kind of stiff and hunched over, and sort of resembles Quasimodo, the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But I am hoping that Bandai announce a 6-inch version of the GMK Godzilla for their Movie Monster Series line soon. Even if it's just a replica of the 8-inch figure from years ago, just like Megalon and Gorosaurus. So, the green caterpillar, yes, even though it calls itself Gigamoth, it's actually meant to be a parody of the character Heimlich from A Bug's Life, which is an old Pixar movie that I used to watch many years ago as a kid. And I don't know why, I just wanted to try a third Kenny out because first of all there was Henny, then there was Silver Hooves, and now a green caterpillar. But as you can tell in the scene, it didn't really work out. Also when he cries out, "Help me, no!" That's meant to be a reference to The Fly when he's caught in the spider's web and he's crying, "Help me, help me!" Goji Kruger eats him, and the bloody graffiti in the background, well, the message that says, "I knew that should have been Silver Hooves," that was the more serious message. But the other bloody graffiti with Hans Moleman from The Simpsons, that was just me prying around. So it's basically saying, "Moleman was here." Now Varn and Baragon have entered the nightmare, even though they claim that they're either dozing or just having a nap, but they've clearly both fallen asleep. Goji Kruger realizes this, and so he turns around and gets ready to atomic blast them. And speaking of which, I am aware that NECA did an atomic version of the GMK Godzilla, but I wasn't really too enthusiastic on it. It looked cool, but I prefer the normal one. Also in the script, this scene was meant to go on a bit longer, but again, due to lack of Photoshop and lack of time, it had to be shortened. Varn and Baragon were to play a bigger part, but they wouldn't really do much. If my memory serves me correctly, I think Baragon was going to be the damsel in distress, where Goji Kruger would have grabbed him and attempted to devour him, and Varn would be the one to defeat Goji Kruger in a very corny way, and basically what was going to happen was that he was going to wish for a tsunami to consume him, and it contained 10,000 oxygen destroyers. The tsunami itself made it into the final product, but not the wishing. That was a bit too corny. But either way, it does contain 10,000 oxygen destroyers. This was meant to be explained as well. I am quite pleased with the water effects that I've done, even though it's unrealistic. And Goji Kruger, just like Gojira all the way back in 1954, he is reduced to a skeleton and becomes nothing but bare bones. When I drew the skeleton, I actually looked up pictures of the actual Godzilla skeleton just to make sure that it's a mirror image. Even though the bones are not 100% accurate, but I'm pleased with the end result. And for this scene when Godzilla wakes up the trio, this was where the Guardians were going to appear and they would have explained everything, such as the glow magic lights and the tsunami. But again, like I've been saying, I was skinned for time, and so that scene was cut. Also, when Godzilla says, "I shouldn't have said that," that was a reference to when Hagrid said, "Oh, I shouldn't have said that," in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, or Sorcerer's Stone if you're an American. That quote was one of 2 hints that Zuko will return in a future episode of K&C. The second one was at the credits when we hear the roar. Another reason why the Guardians were cut was because some of the things that they said wouldn't have made sense, especially after what we had seen throughout the climax. Because they would have made out that the trio did their parts, where it was mostly Anguirus doing all the work, and Varn and Baragon didn't do much. And thus I'm still thinking on what voices to give GMK, Ghidorah, and Baragon. Mothra will be a generic female voice, but the other two I haven't decided yet. And so after another bloodstained title card, we finally come across Nessie, who hadn't appeared in the episode yet, not until right at the end, and Godzilla's showing him the most dirtiest website in the universe. They come across a video that they think it's going to be full of, well, you fill in the blank, but instead it's a video of Pigface and Gabra. And what were they doing? Well, you don't want to know, trust me. And go by the expressions, you could tell that they're both horrified. So basically what happened was that Pigface did a thing with Gabra, and then he accidentally killed the amphibian kaiju and attempted to flush his corpse down the toilet, which is why it was clogged up and Vaughn had to come and clean it out. And when Nessie screams out, "This is a real nightmare on Monster Island!" And that's what the episode was really all about. It wasn't just referring to the nightmares that were being invaded by Goji Kruger, but by what the two stubborn monsters had seen on the internet. And so the episode now comes to an end. I think Nightmare on Monster Island is so far my favourite episode of Kaiju and Cryptids. Before, it was Gigan's most epic quest, but I think it's been topped by Nightmare. Will it be topped by the upcoming episode Mission Gorath? Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. Also in the credits, when I listed the Gojiras, I labelled Titanus Godzilla as Monsterverse Goji because I had forgotten what he was called. So, a bit of a minor error. And the roar that you hear at the end of the credits, that's to indicate that Goji Kruger will return. So yeah, that's the audio commentary for Kaiju Cryptids Nightmare on Monster Island. I think I did well for my first commentary work. I mean, I would like to look back on some of my other projects and comment on them. It won't be a regular thing, but sort of like a now and then. Anyways, this is Dragonzilla signing out. Take care and I'll see you all next time. Oh wait, actually, before I go, I have a little announcement. On Friday, the channel will be turning 10 years old, and I've got a tribute video all set to premiere for that day, so stay tuned for that. Okay, I'm going for real this time. Bye for now.